Okay, so welcome to our October virtual quality talk. And as usual, we are using the corporate Zoom account of D2L, so thanks to them for continuing to share that with us. The usual reminder, if you want to find us on Twitter, it's at KWSQA. And here is your KWSQA board, although some changes coming soon to this, which we'll touch on in the next couple of slides. We've got the next couple of virtual quality talks planned out for you as well. So in November, we'll have Bailey, who is one of our board members, sharing a presentation with us. And in the new year, we'll welcome Lavina back to the KWSQA again for another talk. You might remember she did a presentation for us several months ago, but she's got a new topic now. But after January, we do have some slots open kind of in the winter 2022 timeframe. So if you or someone that you know has an idea for a quality talk, we'd love to hear from you. You can go ahead and submit the CFP form at our website. Similarly, we do have some availability to partner with a local organization on one of our testing games events. So if you think that your organization might be interested in running one of these with us, likely still virtually at this point, again, visit our website and there's a form you can fill out where you can give us a little bit more information about you, and we'll be in touch. A reminder about the memberships that we have for sale this year. They're a cost of $20 Canadian and available from our website. Just right there on the main homepage, you'll find the button you can click to buy one. You don't need a membership to attend our events this year, but if you buy one, it will just help to support our organization. And it also does give you eligibility to vote or run in our upcoming board of directors election. And speaking of that, we are actually almost at the end of our call for nominations period already. So that opened on October 1st, but we will still take nominations until November 1st. So you've got a few more days. I think the 1st is Monday. So think about it over the rest of this week and the weekend. If yourself or anyone you know would like to, if you would like to nominate yourself or someone you know, then you still got a little bit of time. We'll share with you the list of nominees on November 10th, and we'll have voting towards the end of November, and we'll share the results on December 1st at our annual general meeting. A reminder about our code of conduct, which applies to both virtual and in-person events. Anyone from the board is very happy to answer questions about this anytime if you have any. So for today, we will have a presentation, and we're told there should be some time for audience Q&A at the end. But if you do have questions that you'd like to address during the presentation, the presenters are open to fielding those. Preferably just come off mute and ask your question. But if you'd rather type in chat, then I can perhaps ask the question on your behalf. And then a reminder that we're doing a draw for a $50 Amazon gift card for people who submit our post-meeting feedback surveys. So you can have one entry per survey that you complete between now and our annual general meeting. But if you were listening a minute ago, you'll know that the AGM is coming up pretty quick. So only a couple of opportunities left to get your entries in for this draw. All right, so getting to the good part here, today's presentation, we're looking ahead to the future and imagining what a tester might be like in the future. And we're welcoming Peter and Gerie today as our presenters. If you were at our Targeting Quality conference way back in 2013, I believe, you might have seen a presentation by Peter at that time. Yeah, we're very excited to welcome both of them here today. I hear they've actually both already been out to some in-person events to present in the last little while. So that's exciting and gives us hope that maybe someday soon we can also return to an in-person Targeting Quality event as well. So that's all for me, and I'll let them take it over from here.
Okay, Tina, thank you so much. And yes, we have done one in-person event in the last 2 years. That was about a month ago at Swiss Testing Day. So we went to Zurich, and I will say that international travel is still a challenge.
A lot of paperwork.
Let's see, share screen. Tester of the future, share. And let's see if I can put this in present mode. Can you see the screen successfully, Tina?
For me, it's still kind of loading. It says you have started screen sharing, but I don't actually see it yet. So maybe that's just me. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure.
I can see it.
There we go.
Okay, great. What we're going to talk about is the tester of the future. I'd like to, before we get started, I'd like to say a little bit about where this presentation came from. About 2 years ago, Gerie and I attended a meetup of the Agile New England group. And there was a highly anticipated presentation there called The Future of Work. I won't mention the name of the speaker, but and I'll summarize it by saying it was not a very good presentation. So we walked out of there saying, we could do better than this. So we started researching this, and we came up with some surprising things that we'd like to share with you today. So a little bit about me. I speak whenever I can, really. For the last 2 years, it's been almost entirely virtual. And I've been a technology writer for well over 20 years now. I have graduate degrees in applied mathematics, computer science, and oddly enough, psychology. Today, with my career, I consider myself to be a technology communicator. I'm a former university professor in computer science and math, and a former technology journalist. From a more personal standpoint, I'm a cat owner and also a distance runner. And you see the one photo there, that's Gerie and I finishing my first half marathon. Was it your 50th?
It was my 50th.
It was her 50th half marathon in Reykjavik, Iceland. You're welcome to email me or contact me via LinkedIn or whatever, but I'm a peter@petervarhol.com. So let's hear a little bit about Gerie.
I'm Gerie Owen. I'm a quality engineering architect and test manager at ZS Medulin. I also write, I'm a subject matter expert on testing for Tech Target's searchsoftwarequality.com. Also a conference presenter. I tend to focus a lot on quality and testing topics. They're my main thing, and I enjoy running, and I don't have a cat right now, but I also really enjoy cats.
So agenda, what we're going to talk about over the next 40 minutes or so is what we valued in workers, employees, testers in the past, why that's changed, why we're looking more towards flexibility than specific expertise today. However, we also recognize there's limitations in flexibility, and we talk about the relationship between flexibility and testing. What we hope you'll learn is that there are some significant changes affecting work in general, testing certainly, but work in general and specific technology skill sets. How these changes are impacting testing, and how to prepare for new ways of thinking about the practice of testing.
And although we won't be focusing on it a lot in this presentation, one of the major shifts in affecting the work of testers is the shift from quality assurance to quality engineering. And I'll throw some things in here and there as we go through this presentation.
So I'd like to start off by telling you about Ernie. Ernie was one of my adult graduate students when I taught computer science and mathematics. Ernie was an absolute expert in C++. He had it down cold, but he was more specific than that. He was an absolute expert in Borland Turbo C++ version 3.0, a product and a skill set that he thought would last his entire career. But of course it didn't. Borland came out with subsequent versions, and Borland eventually got sold off also. So Ernie's career that was based on his very specific expertise in Turbo C++ 3.0, his career crashed and burned. So let's talk a little bit more about expertise. And Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Outliers, in which he notes that expertise is actually a rare commodity, and that it takes at least 10,000 repetitions of a particular activity in order to become an expert. So today, and I'm going to say in the past, we valued grit, put your head down, blocking out distractions, and working on that expertise, committing over a course of study, a course of practice for many years as our chosen course of study. And these were the experts we looked up to. They're still the experts that we look up to.
And from the testing perspective, we started with manual testing, then we got to automated testing, but we kept focused on testing. And now we're challenged to focus in different ways.
So I'm just going to say now that the times are most definitely changing. And you might find this surprising. And I've got some references at the end of this presentation. And Tina, maybe I can send you the presentation after we're done here. And you're welcome to share it with anybody who's interested in looking at this further. But research has found that there's an increasing need, not for expertise, but for distracted workers. Sounds strange, doesn't it? It turns out, however, that people who tend to score high on openness to new experiences means that they're also easily distracted. Hey, look at that bright, shiny thing over there. And you could get people to be distracted in that way. But what research has found is that more distractible people are in fact more flexible in their skill set. Counterintuitively, perhaps, people who are experts and conscientious, that conscientiousness correlates with performance that isn't as good as that of distracted workers. So keep that in mind as we go through the rest of this presentation. It turns out, in particular technology, tech skills have a short half-life. Our tech skills become obsolete, in fact, within about 5 years. We can ride our tech skills as we learn them today. We can ride them into the ground in a few years as the technology ground shifts, or like The Incredibles, we can become more flexible. So what does this mean for the future of work in general, of technology skills and testing in particular? Well, as the rules change, so do ideas about what makes a good worker. What we valued, what was important to our employers and what was important to our colleagues and people that we worked with in the past was the ability to focus, the ability to follow instructions. And we valued grit and stick-to-itiveness, if I spelled that correctly. Yeah. But in the future, what does this mean for the future? It means that we're changing. We're in the process of changing what makes a good worker.
And I think what it means for testers especially is that, yes, all our test design, our test techniques, all of those skills will never go away. But you know, we're we're not automating. Our automation tools are going to keep changing. I mean, we've been so focused on things back from the robot that, you know, that the oh, I can't even remember the name of it, but the work and the you know, the record and playback, and we've gone all the way through Selenium, and now we're looking at the codeless tools that are self-healing. But those aren't going to be the skills that really carry us into the future. It's going to be how we adapt to our new roles as testers in bringing quality engineering and DevOps and continuous testing.
So as Gerie points out, what we're looking for, what employers are looking for, and what employees are going to increasingly value in the future is that level of adaptiveness to new concepts, the ability to change focus rapidly. I gave a presentation, it wasn't this presentation, but several years ago, I gave this presentation at a DevOps conference, not this presentation, but a presentation. And I happened to ask the audience, there were a couple hundred people in the audience, and I said, how many of you are juggling multiple projects? And just about everybody raised their hands. And I said, well, how many are you juggling? 2, 3, 4. And I had a fellow in the back of the room who started waving his arms up and down. And he stood up and said, held up all 10 fingers of both hands. He says, I'm working on 10 different projects right now. So we're increasingly not able to focus on a single effort. Instead, we need to be able to change that focus rapidly. Creativity is also critically important. We're looking for people who can solve problems using creativity, not necessarily using tried and true methods.
Yeah, and for testers, that means we've got to be ready to do things like BDD and TDD. We have to be able to, we have to be able to, we have to do more exploratory testing. We maybe need to use checklists rather than test cases. And we have to be open to that. We have to be open to testing in production.
So why has this change happened? What's changed in our environment that we're now valuing not necessarily expertise, but adaptiveness? Well, we find that the internet provides all the answers. I know people who call themselves programmers who actually have maybe written a handful of lines of code. Instead, they look at, they search the internet for already written solutions and they copy and paste them. So the internet increasingly is providing the answers that technologists need in order to advance their careers and also get their jobs done. Companies also, employers have changed. They want to hire increasingly fewer and fewer people because obviously more people cost more. Experts also tend to cost more. And there are, I'll say, some disadvantages in expertise in focusing on a particular subject matter, a particular problem domain. Expertise is typically narrow in focus, and it tends to go out of scope quickly in that we might be an expert in X, but we might not be an expert in, we might not know anything about X plus 1, for example. So those people who are developing expertise and are trying to maintain expertise may be may be doing nothing more than running, if I can borrow from Alice in Wonderland, a Red Queen's race, which is Alice and the Queen running on a treadmill as fast as they can just to stay in the same place. So experts may well just be, as much as they're trying to maintain and enhance their expertise, they just may be treading water, so to speak.
And I think for testers, this is even bigger because we had to find our place in Agile. Now we have to understand our role or roles in DevOps. our domain is our domain. I think, some testers might think it's shrinking, but it's actually growing. It's actually spreading. And there's nowhere that's even more important is the shift to quality engineering.
So, and we keep on running because our expertise does in fact have a relatively limited shelf life. And as I said in the previous slide, it's not particularly useful outside of a very specific problem domain. So employers increasingly are looking towards general purpose problem solvers, not experts, but those who don't necessarily know the answer, but who can find answers quickly. They can Google it. Maybe they can watch some YouTube videos or take a short course online. But they're looking for people who are asking the right questions and knowing who to ask, less so than automatically already knowing the answer.
And for quality assurance professionals, that means that they have to go from focusing on their test techniques and focusing on finding defects to focusing to becoming quality engineers, to build quality and to focus on how to prevent defects and how to bring quality into the entire process from ideation through post-production.
So what is it about flexibility that's becoming more attractive, other than the fact that we're looking for people who don't know the answer but can find it quickly? Well, it turns out that the United States Navy has extensively researched this particular topic, in particular, flexibility versus experience. And I have a citation or two at the end of this presentation, if you're interested in following up on that. But they find that those who, their research has shown that those who are able to adapt to changing circumstances, even in the middle of problem-solving exercises, do better jobs in general. So as a result, the Navy has deployed new combat ships that have a crew of 40 rather than a crew of perhaps several hundred. Each crew member has at least 3 jobs, and no crew member is a specialist. They're expected to be able to do multiple tasks with equal proficiency. However, I mean, this sounds great. However, there are limits to flexibility. For example, the Navy had to call in a contractor to fix a crane on one of these ships because they did not have the expertise, which they would normally do if they had a crew of several hundred. They did not have the expertise on the ship to be able to fix this particular crane. These ships also, because like I said, they have 40 people, they're staffed by 40 sailors. These ships don't have enough combat crew to be able to deploy in forward operating areas. However, expertise still counts under certain circumstances. It may or may not be going into the future. It may or may not be enough to build a whole career out of expertise in a single problem domain. And you may find that it will take too much time and effort after a while to either change your problem domain or continue to develop your expertise in that particular problem domain.
And for testers, that's really going to be about those base testing skills, because your base testing skills can be applied to any kind of situation, any kind of methodology that we've got going on here in all of our environments. You know, for example, when you think, okay, so testers automate, but is that really important? Because in DevOps, your developers are coders. So why not have the developer write the code? But does the developer know what to test? Do they know the scenarios? No, they don't. And that is where the tester comes in, the tester's flexibility comes in. Maybe you don't necessarily have to know every possible language to code, because the developer is going to do that, but you need to be able to produce the right test scenarios and explain them to the developer to code.
And whether it's the United States Navy or whether it's a private employer, you may find that minimal staffing, as they continue to run as lean as they possibly can, may mean that important work, maybe not necessarily the work that needs to be done right now, but important work for the future, isn't in fact done. And in fact, at least in the United States, the military has always overstaffed during peacetime, because during times of conflict, during times of war, the military needs to be able to ramp up really quickly. So our military is always overstaffed, but our private employers are increasingly cutting staff. So let's see if that's a good idea. Well, in stable environments, practice and expertise, lifelong expertise, can be valuable. So I have a couple of examples here. Music rarely changes. Education systems don't change all that often over a period of decades. Most manufacturing processes are built on people understanding the process and working with that process for years at a time. However, there's a problem with expertise even in stable environments. And that is that all too often these problem domain experts fail to introspect, to inspect their knowledge for signs of decay. Are they missing out on things? Is the field subtly changing underneath them and they're not changing? And I'll say also, there are rapidly changing environments. In these rapidly changing environments, such as conflict and war, such as technology, such as space and aviation, flexibility is much more valuable than expertise.
So for a tester, if you're in a stable environment, you still have to be aware of what's going on. If you're not doing agile, if you're not doing DevOps, you need to be keeping up on that. You need to be looking into quality engineering versus quality assurance, and you need to be taking some courses on these things.
But flexibility, there's a symbiotic relationship here, in that being a flexible worker, you rely on somebody else's expertise. So expertise still has to be there. We need the right answer to be available there on Google. So some expert has to have put it there. Yet in many cases, experts may not be the best people to apply their expertise. And this is, if you've read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, he says that people who have the expertise are oftentimes not the best people to apply it. They can give advice, they can give direction, but they can't necessarily practice that expertise. And it's fascinating reading in terms of we turn their expertise into to people who are more flexible and can better apply that expertise to specific situations. And for the experts, if you have a hammer, everything in fact looks like a nail. So whether or not a particular problem is within the expert's problem domain, he or she may treat it like it is. So given all this, as I said at the beginning of this slide, there's a symbiotic relationship between expertise, which we still need and will continue to need, and flexibility, which is growing in importance. So, but there's also an uncomfortable truth about our careers. And that is that many careers are still defined by expertise. I take the military services here, at least in the United States. Our military services literally have hundreds of specializations. and being able to get promoted and get more responsibility are based on mastering these specializations. And also, I'm a veteran, so I understand this intimately. It's almost impossible if you don't like the specialization that you've been defined, that has been given to you, it's almost impossible to change that specialization throughout your career. Likewise, many civilian, many private employers also have very specific career tracks. Corporations are not necessarily looking for flexible generalists. They have slots to fill. And oftentimes when they're filling those slots, they look at perhaps somebody who's done a few years of this and a few years of that and say, no, I want somebody who's focused for 5 years or 10 years in C++ or testing automation or something like that. So we may find, in fact, even today and for the foreseeable future, we may find that our own career in a particular, specifically in a particular company, is not tied to learning as much as we can. It's not tied to being that flexible generalist, but is still tied to a specialization. So what does this all have to say about testing? So let's bring this home here. It's becoming less common to find traditional testers' role. Whether we see advertised or we see companies asking for an SDET, an automation engineer, or an agile team member, they're oftentimes not asking for a traditional tester. All of these people may in fact be testers, but they're also doing a wide variety of other things, like that Navy ship where they had each crew member did at least 3 things competently. We'll find that increasingly testers are not necessarily called testers, and they have to do other things, including testing.
And that's particularly important with the shift from QA, the traditional tester, to quality engineering. I have a whole presentation about that shift and the roles that testers can play in that. And the main thing about quality engineering, it's about process. It's people, process, and tools, but it's about managing the process of quality, implementing reviews from even ideation. Is that testable? The testers become quality engineers. They look at everything from the beginning, from the ideation, the requirements development, the development of the user stories. Are all these things going to be testable? And they start testing at the requirements, and that goes all the way through. It goes all the way through to post-production testing. It's about building the quality in, and that can scare some testers, but it also opens up all kinds of different roles for the people that tend to be technical, that like to be technical. There's the SESDET. There's the automation. There's still the automation engineers, but there's roles in managing the process. There's the QE architect, which is my role. It's developing processes across not only the software development life cycle, but the whole product development life cycle. And those roles will continue.
So you may think of yourself as a tester, but increasingly employers are looking for people who are proficient in testing, but they can also write scripts, whether they be testing scripts, automation scripts, production scripts, or things like that. They may participate in pair programming. They may do product and workflow maintenance over the product life cycle, or they may assist in writing documentation too. So increasingly employers are looking at testers and still value the skill, but they want more than just testing skill increasingly. So in time, the tester title may in fact go away almost entirely, but, and it's a big but, the skill set of testing will remain. The curiosity, the ability to dissect an application and be able to diagnose that application, to be able to find flaws and describe those flaws to others. Those skill sets will remain, but they'll be combined with other types of skills. And if you don't know how to do something, maybe you find a YouTube video or take a short, massive online open course or something like that, but you know where to find the answer. So what does that make you? Oftentimes, we associate our lives with our jobs or skills. When we go up to somebody that we just met, we might say, "Hi, what do you do?" And they might say, "I'm a tester," or "I'm a programmer," or something like that. Oftentimes, we associate a description of ourselves with our jobs or our skills. So the fact that we may have multiple skills that we're not necessarily expert at, does that cheapen our self-image? Do we feel less of ourselves because we can't describe ourselves in a word or two? Last, there'll be fewer of us. There'll be fewer, I'll say, pure testers, and there'll be more people who have testing in their bag of skills, but don't necessarily think of themselves as testers.
Yeah, testers will have a lot more opportunities. They'll become quality engineers, and they'll be able to focus on any part of the engineering processes, the quality engineering processes.
So there's also a trend, we've been talking about this in the last half hour or so, but there's a trend towards flexible generalists. I spent some time looking for a new job a couple of years ago. And I found that on no less than 4 occasions during the interview process, I was asked to take an aptitude test. And the aptitude tests that they're usually online tests, they're offered by specific companies, and the employers contract with those companies to be able to have their candidates take these particular kind of tests. However, they're not tests of expertise. They're tests of, they cover 2 general areas, I'd say. General logic and computational ability, and personality tests. You may have had to take 1 or more of these. I took a couple, like I said, a couple of years ago, I ended up in a few month period, ended up taking 4 of these tests. And they generally, as I said, they'll cover logic, what belongs in this group, can you do I'll say computations in your head, and personality tests. They want to know if you're going to get along with other people. So what these tests measure is not specifically not expertise in the problem domain that you're interviewing for, but they measure general intelligence and knowledge, the ability to learn, flexibility, and maybe also the ability to work well with others. I had my doubts there, but maybe those personality tests are able to discern whether or not you're able to work with others. Yet we still need the classical testers to fill that expertise gap. We need somebody to, I'll say, haul the wood, if I can use a vernacular there. We need people who can write test plans, test procedures, individual test cases, do manual testing, because manual testing is not going to go away anytime soon. They need to be able to assess risks. They need to be able to write bug reports such that they can file them and turn them over, and those reports are actionable by the people who have to diagnose and fix the problem. But there won't be nearly as many of these classical tester experts than there are today.
Well, there'll be parts, that role will expand. And the thing that anybody with a testing background that becomes a quality engineer, they're going to be responsible for bringing the customer focus to the development and testing process. And as such, focusing on the customer is going to be putting them in the role of the guardian of the company's reputation.
So nothing that we've said here is cut and dried. It's not clear cut at all. Do all tech skills become obsolete very quickly? Many of them do. Some appear not to. Some of you may still, for example, code or test COBOL applications. And that's been around for before I was born, to tell you the truth. And also many open source frameworks seem to have a longer shelf life because they're not a full application. They're not a particular skill set. Instead, they're a tool. But you need more than a framework to be able to build an application and test that application. And as I pointed out, some legacy technologies, COBOL, Fortran, I still know people who code in those, technologies last a long time before they fade away. But we know, Gerie and I both know, many thought leaders in testing. I'm not going to mention any names, but we probably met over the years of speaking at conferences and participating in the testing community. We probably know just about all of them today. Very interesting thing about them. They don't seem to be, many of them don't seem to be practitioners, or at least full-time practitioners anymore. Most of them do, instead, they do training, and they don't actually do much in the way of hands-on. So we also have to ask the question, can a few quick-thinking generalists really replace a fleet of specialists? And that's an opinion thing. But I have my doubts as to whether we're able to fully replace our specialists with just a few flexible generalists.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
So with all that in mind, how should you prepare your career? Or many of you might be mid-career right now. How should you continue your career? We offer three points here. First of all, take an interest in everything that's going on in your environment. See all experience as interesting and meaningful. Learn from the coders. Learn from the production specialists. Learn from the site reliability engineers and things like that. Find out what they do and why they're doing it. Pay attention to skills in particular needed to design, develop, test, and deliver software. And learn and practice all of those skills. Don't limit yourself to a particular, I'm a tester, that's all I have to worry about.
And take advantage of webinars that are offered through various companies. Take advantage of your local meetups, and even not so local meetups, because all of the at this point in the pandemic, we still have most of those meetings going on online. So you can pick up really valuable information from them.
So are we there yet? Well, we're not nearly there from switching from expertise to a symbiotic relationship between flexible generalists, backstopped by a few experts who do in fact know the answer and post it on Google or wherever it might be. And there's going to be friction in getting to that point. Some jobs will, some companies will continue to demand experts. Some will shun them. Some will say, no, we want that flexible generalist. You may be caught in the middle. And I also want to say that expertise is valuable to certain groups. In fact, it's the last refuge of certain groups. Older workers who perhaps have an entire adult career in a particular area, minorities who are looking to get ahead and handicapped people who perhaps are limited in their ability to not necessarily learn new things, but limited in their ability to take in-person classes, go to meetups and things like that. They oftentimes rely on their expertise to give them a secure and rewarding career. And last, despite your best efforts, your individual mileage may vary. You may be an absolute expert in Borland Turbo C++ 3.0, but that can go away with the drop of a hat. Also, you may be the world's best flexible expert, but you may find that the employers that you contact are not necessarily interested in that particular skill set. So your mileage, your individual mileage, what we're talking about, I'll say, is trends. We're talking about things that are in general happening in work and happening in technology and happening in testing. But if you go out and look for a job, your individual mileage may vary. And
I think you can change that though, you know, because you'll get feedback from your interviews and you'll know what you need to look at and you'll know how to get more mileage out of your career and expand it.
So here's our list of references. And like I said, Tina, I'll go ahead and send you this presentation. If you want to distribute it, you're more than welcome to do so. And any questions?
Yeah, if you share the presentation, we'll find a way of sharing it with the rest of the attendees as well.
Great.
We've got a question in the chat about how AI can maybe fit into what you've been discussing today.
We've done several presentations on AI. Go ahead, Gerie.
You know, there's a couple of aspects. A lot of the automation tools out there now are focused on using AI to create and develop your test suite. Again, that's something that you can learn. And it can be a good thing for testers to learn. The important part of testing AI is to understand the data that it needs to be trained with.
So your expert may actually be an artificial expert. It may actually be an AI or a machine learning tool. However, we also have to, I'd say more so than a person that we can talk to, look at in the eye and say, yes, I understand you've been doing this for a while, you're an expert and all of that. But we have to be able to trust that AI is giving us a complete answer and the correct answer. And that's going to take time too.
Well, and that is the tester's role, is to determine whether the AI is truly giving us the correct answer.
Other questions or, oh, a couple more coming in here. I don't know who wants to go first. Are you able to read the chat or do you want me to read out the questions?
If you can read it, I'd appreciate it.
All right. First one, so digital testing. Maybe looking for recommendations on training materials. Actually, I'm not too sure about this question here about digital testing. If the person who entered it wants to give some additional clarification, that might help.
There's some teaching training with digital testing. Not quite sure what that might be referring to, but does.
Do you mean testing different digital channels, more like mobile and?
Anyway, we can come back to that one potentially. There's a couple
Sure.
more. One is asking about domain knowledge. So, for example, in our area here where most of our members are located, we happen to have a lot of insurance companies. And so then maybe it's valuable that you have sort of domain knowledge of how insurance works when you go to work at one of these companies. And then in particular for a test or QA type role. So the question is, how important do you see domain knowledge being in the future of quality roles?
Well, I think it has to do with, I also have an insurance background. I spent quite a few years, I started my career in insurance. But you can, and the domain knowledge can be very, very helpful, especially if you want to expand into different roles from testing. But I think what you'll find too, as you move across, so I began in insurance. I've also worked in the utilities realm, the electric and gas utilities, transportation. Now I'm in the software's medical device area. You can still apply your testing skills to any domain. If you want to focus on one domain, then really get a lot of knowledge in that domain.
A couple of years, I'm sorry.
Good.
I was just going to say, a couple of years ago, I made a statement at a conference, which I said, I think that testing is, we're entering the golden age of the domain specialist. And I think that domain knowledge is, if anything, becoming more important, especially as we start using AI and machine learning tools to be able to assist us in testing and to be able to, I'll say, help us test AI systems too. But I think that the domain knowledge is very, very important to have, and I think it's growing increasingly important. I really think that we're entering a golden age of the domain specialist.
Yeah, especially when you apply quality engineering processes across the development life cycle, the domain knowledge can be invaluable.
Great. Next question is sort of around how testers can continue to be relevant in cloud environments. And if I read between the lines, maybe I'm assuming that the question is more like, in a cloud environment where you are sort of like building your application out of a bunch of off-the-shelf services and tools that have probably been well tested already by the time you're using them. What is the role for testers in that kind of situation?
So Gerie had a job a few years ago where she worked at, they brought in a lot of commercial software. They wrote relatively little of their software. It was utility. They wrote relatively little of their own software, but instead they would, I will say, buy commercial and then configure and customize that. So I think Gerie probably has something to say about customization and configuration.
I think when you're testing products that are in the cloud, you need to focus on, it's a different approach. You have to focus on the gap analysis, because and one of the things that your business people aren't necessarily going to understand is that they will get their workflows, but they may not get them in the way they're used to doing. And you've got to focus on testing the configurations versus the customizations. You want more configurations, less customizations. You need to have a plan for testing the updates. They'll maybe give you only a very certain amount, sometimes maybe less than 2 weeks before they push it. You have to have a plan for doing that. You have to be, especially when you're in a multi-tenant environment, you have to be really conscious of testing to make sure that you have access to your environment and not everybody else's, so nobody else has access to your environment. It's a bit of a different focus. And it's certainly, you know, something that's really important for everybody to have.
Yeah, definitely a lot of applications are built using that kind of tool set these days. What else? There's a few just like thanks for the presentation, good insights type comments.
I see the one, I appreciate that you shared the guy in the C++ example. When it comes to testing automation, you mentioned that the tools will keep changing. So what brings job security to a testing, a QA career? And my answer to that is, I wish I knew.
Well, I think when it comes to, you know, it comes to automation, if you really want to be an automation specialist, you have to keep abreast of all the new tools. I mean, think about it. We've gone from the old-fashioned Windrunner through Silk, through all of the Selenium-based tools, and now, you know, Selenium all of those tools have been the most popular tools, but now you're looking at tools that are not Selenium based. You're looking at tools that are codeless, that are you're looking at tools that are self-healing, so that they'll fix when the object on the screen moves. You got to you got to keep up with all those tools.
And I really see that, as I said, there's going to be some friction getting to the difference between the subject matter, the problem domain expert today with the symbiotic relationship with the flexible generalist. So people may find that they may choose one or the other approach, and it turns out that they're just have bad luck looking for jobs. I have bad luck keeping a career and things like that. So I know that I might fall into that category, but I consider myself to be a flexible generalist, but I haven't found a whole lot of call for that in many of the interviews that I've had over the years. That seems to be changing. It seems to be increasing, but probably more slowly than I would like. So is there a silver bullet for job security in a testing career? And I guess just learn everything you can is what I would do. I wouldn't call that a silver bullet, but I would call that necessary, but not necessarily sufficient. Tina, I see we're at the top of the hour here. If you want to save that chat and send it off to us, I'm happy to continue answering questions online.
Sure. Yeah, I was just going to say that we're kind of at the end of our time here, but you had shared your contact information and
Yes.
seemed open to people reaching out if they have more questions afterwards. I did save the chat, and I'll send that to you afterwards. And yeah, people looking for a recording of this presentation, you'll be able to find it in the KWSQA YouTube channel in the next several days once I get a chance to upload it there. So yeah, thank you everyone for coming and for all the great questions. And thank you, Peter and Gerie, for sharing all of your insights on this topic. It looks like the audience got a lot out of it. So yeah, we wish you a good rest of your Wednesday and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you. We're having a nor'easter here in the Boston area, so it's a pretty dismal day.
No, we're lucky we have power. We didn't lose the power for the presentations.
Yeah.
Oh, yikes. Yeah, we didn't even have a backup plan for that. So
Yeah.
good luck. Hope the weather
Okay.
improves.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Take care.
Thanks for having us. Take care.